Okay, so what if I told you that a super successful, fast growing tech company was literally bleeding cash on its biggest projects, and they had no idea how to stop it? This is a story about how they went from complete financial chaos to total control. But it also reveals a second, much quieter spending problem, one that might just be lurking inside your own organization. Let's kick things off with a number that should make any manager a little nervous: 43.81%. Now, that's not a profit margin or some amazing growth rate. No, that's how much one single project at this company went over its original budget. That's not just a red flag, it's a five-alarm fire.
In fact, it was so bad that when academics analyzed this whole mess later, they didn't pull any punches. They basically said that an overrun this massive showed it was foolish to have even started the project in the first place. So this wasn't just a bad forecast, you know? It was a sign of a deeply fundamentally broken process at the company we're going to call Company Z. So let's dive into Company Z's budget nightmare. Picture this. They're a high-tech firm in the middle of a massive growth spurt. Revenue's soaring, they're hiring people left and right. On the surface, everything looked absolutely fantastic. But that success was hiding a really dangerous secret. They had completely lost control of their spending on major projects. And this chart, wow, it really puts the whole problem into perspective. That one disastrous project was an outlier, sure, at almost 44% over, but look at their average for 2016, nearly 17% over budget across the board. In this industry, 10% over is kind of the absolute limit. At Company Z, every single one of their major projects just blew right past that target. This is the classic management dilemma, isn't it? The problem is obvious. You're hemorrhaging money. But the cause? It's a total mystery. Is it bad planning? Inaccurate quotes from vendors? Inefficient work on the ground? How do you even begin to fix a problem that's tangled up across so many different departments? Well, Company Z didn't just throw more money at the problem hoping it would go away. They turned to a really structured, data-driven framework that actually comes from the world of manufacturing. It's called the DMAIC method, and it's a powerful 5-step plan for getting to the real root of a problem and fixing it for good. So let's break this down. It all starts with defining the problem, getting super specific about what's actually going wrong. Then you measure everything. You collect the cold, hard data on how things are working right now. With that data in hand, you can analyze it to find the real root cause, not just the symptoms. Once you know that, you can improve the process with a targeted solution. And finally, and this part's key, you put controls in place to make sure you don't just slide back into the old broken habits. It's a complete loop. And to really understand that measure step, just look at the timeline for their worst project. It was supposed to take less than 30 days. Instead, it spiraled into an 89-day mess. A request is filed, contractors are brought in, but then, 61 days in, a major design change, and then another one right before the finish line. This wasn't a process, it was just reactive chaos. So what was the crucial point? After all that analysis, the root cause wasn't some complex technical failure or a bad contractor. It was shockingly simple. There was no clear ownership. The department that requested the work and the maintenance unit that was actually doing it weren't communicating. Nobody was responsible for signing off on the final plans before the spending started. Okay, so let's get to the results because this is where the story gets really good. Once they identified and fixed that simple communication gap, just by assigning clear responsibility, the results were nothing short of stunning. This is the before picture from 2016. If you look down that management reserve column, it tells the whole story. It's just a sea of red ink. From a few percent to that disastrous 43%, nearly every single project needed a significant cash infusion after it had already started. And now, check out the after picture from 2017. The transformation is just incredible. Once that new, controlled process was in place, just look at all those zeros. Project after project came in perfectly on budget. The one that needed a little extra was still well under the 10% target. They went from absolute chaos to complete control. It's a fantastic success story, right? A real testament to the power of having a good process. But it brings up a different and maybe even more interesting question. Company Z's problem was big, it was loud, and it was obvious on the balance sheet. But what about the spending problems that you can't see? This brings us to a really powerful idea known as the Pareto principle, but you probably know it as the 80-20 rule. When you apply to company spending, it reveals this huge hidden area of activity. Typically, about 80% of a company's total spending goes to just 20% of its suppliers. We call this the head spend. But what about the other side of that coin? Well, that's what we call tail spend. It's the huge number of low-value, high-volume purchases that make up the last 20% of your total spending. You can think of it as the junk drawer of company spending. Thousands of small, unmanaged transactions that are just too small for anyone in procurement to really notice. And trying to tame this long tail is a completely different beast. You can't use a big, structured DMAIC project to fix thousands of tiny, uncoordinated purchases for things like office supplies, software subscriptions, or repair parts. The problem isn't a bad process, it's the sheer volume of it all, and a total lack of visibility. So let's compare these two issues. With major projects, like the ones at Company Z, the core problem was a poor process that could be fixed. But with tail spend, the fundamental problem is low visibility. You just can't manage what you can't see, and most companies simply can't see these thousands of small transactions happening every single day. And that low visibility, it creates a whole bunch of really nasty problems. You get way too many suppliers who aren't properly vetted, contract management is a mess, invoicing becomes a total nightmare, and worst of all, you get what's called maverick buying, where employees just purchase whatever they need from wherever they want with no strategy or coordination. It's literally death by 1,000 cuts to your budget. Which leads us to a final thought. Company Z saved millions by fixing the one big visible problem they had. But for most organizations, the even bigger question might just be this. How much value in savings, efficiency, and risk reduction is hiding in the thousands of small problems you can't even see?